Showing on the program today, we talk to Bode Olanipekun, Managing Partner, Olanipekun and Co., also a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, as he shares his thoughts on fraud and forgery by legal practitioners and the issue of the Nigerian minimum wage. Also this week, the Kwara State government swears in a new Qadi of the state's Sharia Court of Appeal, Justice Zakaria Abdulrazak. We'll also bring you some of the top trending stories from the courtrooms, plus our question of the week. Should government have a website with a complete database of rape convicts with photographs, names and addresses? Well, that's the lineup on this episode of Law Weekly. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Nwoka. Let's begin with the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onoge, during the conferment of the rank Senior Advocate on 31 lawyers at an event to mark the beginning of the 2018-2019 legal year in Abuja earlier in September. He said that some lawyers forged court documents to qualify for nomination for the rank of SAN.
In the just concluded exercise, some applicants were found to have engaged in dishonorable conduct, such as forgery of judgments, resulting in their being reported to the police for investigation and possible prosecution. We have to know that if one is not for any reason qualified to wear silk as a judicial officer, he cannot wear it as a senior advocate of Nigeria.
Justice Onoge said the forged judgments were part of the requisite conditions submitted to the Legal Practitioners and Privileges Committee for scrutiny. Although the names of the offending lawyers were not made public, the CJN said that they had been reported to the police and after investigation will be prosecuted if found culpable. In this next interview, we start with the views of one of the new senior advocates, his views on forgery and the Nigerian minimum wage. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Would you consider yourself a new generation lawyer or one of the old generation?
By the biological dynamics, I think I'm more of a new generation lawyer, whatever that means. If it's just the age, biologically I would say that I'm more, you probably categorize me as a new generation lawyer. Simply because I was called to the bar about 12 years ago. I only became a lawyer 12 years ago, so.
Some have said that some of the old generation lawyers tainted with corruption. Some of them are corrupt. Is this something that you agree?
Truth is, corruption is not really a function of age. So it's a function of the values that you subscribe to and your fidelity to those values, the things that you hold dear to, the red lines, so to speak, that you decide not to cross. So it's really not a thing of age. You could get someone that is 2 days old as a lawyer and the values he has imbibed before being called as a lawyer are those that look for quick shortcuts that are illegitimate. So that sort of person you would categorize as a new generation lawyer, but might be corrupt. So it's really not a function of age. Corruption is not a function of age at all.
The CJN, Chief Justice of Nigeria, talked about how some lawyers have forged documents, especially while during the inauguration of new silks. Why would the men and women of the learned profession be tainted with that?
Honorable, the Chief Justice of the Federal Republic of Nigeria made this disclosure at the inauguration of Senior Advocates of Nigeria, my own set, a few months ago. And to be honest, it's disturbing, particularly because there are very grave sanctions. So you'd wonder why anybody that's aware of the sanctions that are attacked or that are the consequential sanctions arising from these misdeeds will still venture to engage in them. It's an unusual boldness, But again, it all comes down to what values the individual subscribes to. That really is the foundation of why anybody would venture to take these kind of risks that, even if the pay in the short term, are definitely not sustainable in the long term.
Is it so difficult becoming a senior advocate in Nigeria? I mean, it looks like there's a lot of perks that they will be desperate enough to forge their certificates.
It's a privilege being a lawyer. It's now a further privilege being a senior advocate of Nigeria. And naturally, with every privilege comes even more responsibilities. So I think that if the general view is to de-emphasize the privileges and appreciate the responsibilities, the quest to get elevated to the rank will be a very sober one, because I can tell you for free that the responsibilities are very enormous and they dwarf the privileges into insignificance.
Before being conferred as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, or now that you have been conferred as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, your responsibilities have more than doubled?
If you look at the guidelines for elevation to the rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, now it expressly talks of legal practitioners who are able to justify an expectation from the public as leaders, the courts, and their clients. So there really is an heightened expectation, naturally. There's an heightened expectation. So with that comes with more responsibilities. You'd need to sharpen your skills, be more careful with processes you present to court, even be more diligent with handling clients' instructions. So it certainly is a lot of more responsibilities, certainly.
Your father was one of the youngest senior advocates of his time. How do you think other younger lawyers are doing or should be doing, especially to meet global best practices in the legal profession?
One thing that the legal profession in Nigeria clearly has shown with the admission of people like me into the rank of the silk is that the legal profession does not discriminate. My dad became a senior advocate of Nigeria in 1991. That's about 37 years ago. He became a senior advocate of Nigeria at 39, going on 40 years old. So even as at then, there really were no ceilings, there were no barriers. So these barriers really existed in the minds of people. To the glory of God, someone like me, I've beaten that record, so to speak, to show again that there's no limitation. So as a profession that is very central to human nature, the legal profession has kept evolving. Of course, and it's been doing very well to meet the demands of society, which is also a living society. So you see that at every point in time, the laws are being applied, of course with consistency, but without, but also with a consideration for the prevailing realities of the current times.
Tell us your thoughts on the call for true federalism and also restructuring.
You see, these calls for restructuring, I think it's not a new issue. It's probably, I see it more as a reaction to something that has changed from what it was initially. And I'll take one of the elements of restructuring, which really is one of those things that are important to most of the proponents of restructuring, and that is resource control. So if you look at the 1963 Constitution, on resource control, it was specific that there was 50% derivation. So what we call derivation now was 50% in the 1963 Constitution, which really is fair. So whatever royalties was how it was described in that Constitution, accrued from mineral resources extracted from areas where those mineral resources were extracted, those areas will get 50% of the proceeds. That's really fair, and that's what federalism is all about. So sort of grow at your own pace, develop what is unique to every area, and let there be some sort of healthy competition. I would rather say that if we had that with responsible governance, we would have better development. So even if you had the most liberal federalism and you do not have responsible governance, it's really not going to make a difference. Nigeria is not the only country where the center wields so much of power. Norway, for instance, is an example of concentration, significant concentration of power in the center, and that's a very developed economy. If this is the situation Nigeria has found itself, then we should make the best of it.
Would you say 30,000 naira is sufficient as the minimum wage?
I'm not quite familiar with the mathematical indices of how labor arrived at 30,000 naira as minimum wage. But to be honest, that's 30,000 naira as of today is less than, even at the official rate, is less than $100, right? So let's do a generous conversion, and let's say that that's $100. Let's just scale it up and say that it's $100. So on a 30-day month, right, you would say that's about $3 or a little bit over $3. Let's again scale it up and say $4 a month. Now, $4 a day. $4, of course, a day exceed the $100 mark. But let's scale it up generously and say that $4 a day. So, if your minimum wage is $4 a day, right? That says something. Explains the fact that we're still operating at a very mediocre income level. If our argument in the 21st century, Nigeria as the giant of Africa, if the discussion today is about minimum income of $4 per day.